Good evening, and welcome to Dreamy Science Stories. It's a quiet comfort to have you drifting with us tonight. For now, let your breath soften and imagine yourself drifting downward through a quiet column of water. The light above fades from silver to violet, then to a deep, tranquil blue. With each slow descent, the world grows dimmer, calmer, almost weightless, until daylight disappears entirely, and only the soft pulse of the ocean remains. Here, thousands of meters below the surface, lies a forest that has never known the sun. Not a forest of leaves or bark, but one of living stone. Black corals rising like ancient pillars, their branches reaching outward like the limbs of trees that learn to grow in darkness. Some have stood here for millennia, unmoving and patient, shaped not by wind, but by the cold, steady flow of deep-sea currents. As you drift between them, the water feels thick and quiet, as if time itself has slowed to a gentle sway. These coral towers do not rush, do not bend. They simply endure, carrying the memory of oceans older than any human story. If these soft journeys into hidden worlds bring you a sense of peace, you're welcome to gently like, share, or leave a quiet comment. It helps others drift here too. And now, we continue downward. Deep beneath the waves, black corals stretch upward in slow, patient columns, branching like trees that learn to grow without light. Scientifically, these corals form calcium carbonate skeletons that build outward over centuries, layer by careful layer. In the dim glow of a submersible, their silhouettes resemble ancient trunks reaching for a sky that never existed. There is something solemn in their posture, as though they are guardians of a world untouched by sunlight. And as we drift closer, the forest begins to take shape around us. Some black coral colonies have lived for 2, even 4,000 years. While empires rose and vanished, these quiet beings simply kept growing, millimeter by millimeter, undisturbed by time's restless march. Their slow pace is not a flaw, but a strategy. Deep-sea environments are stable, cold, and quiet, allowing life to stretch across millennia. To touch one would be like brushing the surface of an ancient scroll written in mineral and memory. We drift onward, knowing each branch carries centuries of patience. Unlike their colorful, shallow water relatives, these corals do not rely on photosynthesis. There are no sunbeams here, no warm currents. Instead, black corals feed on drifting particles, tiny fragments of plankton, organic snow, and dissolved nutrients descending from the world above. Every morsel is caught by delicate polyps that extend like tiny hands, opening and closing in the dark. It is a quiet banquet, slow and deliberate, and as the water grows colder, the rhythm of this hidden forest grows clearer. Black corals grow so slowly that a single inch can represent decades of life. Polyps deposit minerals grain by grain, building a framework as durable as bone. Over time, the structure becomes intricate, twisted, spiraled, latticed like branches carved by unseen sculptors. When scientists study these skeletons, they find chemical signatures of oceans long gone, like rings inside a terrestrial tree. The coral's body becomes a diary of the planet. We glide deeper into passages shaped by centuries of stillness. Here, growth is measured not in seasons, but in eras. The slow accretion of mineral, The steady gathering of drifting snow, the patient branching of limbs, everything unfolds at a pace so tranquil it feels almost outside of time. Some corals began growing before the earliest cities were built. Others were young when ice sheets covered the earth. To move through these forests is to walk through the memory of water itself. And at each turn, the forest becomes more surreal, more sculpted, more dreamlike. In the glow of exploration light, towering spires emerge, translucent, ribbed, and strangely crystalline. These black corals, when illuminated, reflect soft silver hues that ripple through the water like moonlight passing through glass. Their branches shimmer faintly, as though storing the last fragments of ancient starlight. The architecture feels otherworldly, like wandering between frozen lightning bolts. A hush settles in the water as we glide between the towers. The seafloor is coated with fine sediment that has drifted downward for thousands of years. It settles softly on coral bases, on scattered stones, on the ridges of old skeletons. To the eye, it resembles the ash of a long-extinguished fire, mute, pale, and weightless. Each grain is a fragment of something once alive, a story disassembled and set gently to rest. It creates a landscape both barren and sacred as we move across it. As we float past certain colonies, their branching patterns spiral in elegant curves. Soft arcs, forked tendrils, swirling limbs that resemble ancient cedar trees touched by stardust. These formations arise from how the currents move. Gentle rotations sculpt the living skeleton, encouraging it to curl into graceful, swirling shapes. The result is a forest whose trees seem designed by the tide itself. The deeper we go, the more their shapes resemble dreams rather than organisms. Though the deep sea is still, it is not motionless. Narrow rivers of cold water slip between coral towers, brushing their branches and carrying faint threads of life, nutrients, particles, planktonic snow. To the senses, it feels like standing in a nocturnal forest as a single breath of wind slips through the leaves. The coral sways almost imperceptibly, acknowledging the current with a slow nod, and so the forest breathes in its quiet, unhurried way. When a submersible's lights sweep across the water, tiny particles ignite into visibility, specks of marine snow that glitter as they fall. They drift between branches like glowing dust, settling softly on coral limbs before lifting again with the smallest movement. In this light, the entire forest becomes a night garden, its air thick with floating stars. We hover in the stillness, surrounded by this delicate snowfall of life. Some coral formations form arches, alcoves, and vaulted canopies where branches overlap and intertwine. These spaces look like underwater cathedrals, silent halls sculpted by millennia of slow mineral work. Exploring them feels like wandering through a sanctuary that no living creature built consciously, yet which radiates the reverence of something sacred. Each curve invites us farther inward to witness the artistry of nature's patience. Up close, the surface of black coral is textured, ribbed with old growth layers, knotted where branches divided long ago, smooth where currents have polished them. The branching patterns repeat in fractal echoes, mirroring the mathematics of trees, lightning, rivers. It is geometry, made organic, carved slowly by the ceaseless tide. The longer we linger, the more these patterns feel intentional, like a language spoken in mineral shapes. Where old corals have fallen, They lie like ancient logs on the forest floor. Some structures, weakened by age or shifting sediment, collapse gently onto the sea floor. They remain for centuries, slowly eroding, becoming habitats for small creatures. Their forms are reminiscent of fallen trees in a terrestrial forest, husks that still harbor life long after their standing years have ended. In their presence, one feels the cyclical nature of the deep, the knowing that even here, decay feeds rebirth. When illuminated directly, the corals appear bone white or ashy silver. From the side, they glow with amber or violet hints as light refracts through the water. Turn away, and they vanish into blackness again, as though erasing themselves from the world. It is like watching a landscape appear and disappear with each slow heartbeat. The forest is not just a place. It is a moving illusion shaped by darkness. The structures stand tall because nothing disturbs them. The water is calm, the growth slow, the life sparse. Yet the delicacy of each branch makes it clear how easily the spell could break. These forests have survived for millennia only because time moves differently here. To witness them is to feel the weight and softness of endurance. And so we drift on, deeper into the architecture of this silent world. As we move deeper into this submerged forest, life begins to reveal itself in slow, drifting gestures. A pale fish passes nearby, bleached of all color by the darkness, gliding with a quiet, ghost-like ease. Its eyes are vestigial, mere shadows where sight once mattered, replaced now by senses tuned to the faint vibrations of the deep. It weaves between coral branches as though drawn by memory rather than vision, moving with a serenity that makes the entire world feel softer, quieter. Around its silhouette, the dim particles of marine snow trail behind, like a faint, dissolving veil. Nestled among the coral limbs, threads of movement glimmer faintly. Transparent shrimp cling to the branches, their bodies nearly invisible, except when a curve of glass-like shell catches the submersible's light. They tuck themselves neatly into crevices, sheltering within the coral's embrace, as though hiding beneath a canopy of leaves. Their antennae sway gently, tasting the currents for food or danger, or something only they understand. Watching them is like watching the forest breathe through its smallest beings. Not far from them, a strange and ancient creature drifts into view, a sea spider, long-limbed and deliberate in its movements. It crawls across the coral with a careful grace, its legs impossibly thin, like strands of spun glass balancing on the quiet architecture of the reef. Its form seems pulled from another age, something primordial that followed the whisper of life into the deep and simply never left. The forest accepts it without question, just as it has accepted countless others over thousands of years. A slender eel appears next, winding its way between coral branches with the ease of a ribbon caught in underwater wind. It slips through narrow passages and coils in shadowed alcoves, its body merging with the darkness until it seems not to swim, but to dissolve and reappear with each slow pulse of the water. The eel presses close to the coral stems as though they are living vines, letting them guide its path the way a climber might grip the roots of great trees. The relationship feels intimate, two quiet lives existing in parallel, shaping the space around them. Closer to the base of the forest, strange shapes rise like ancient stonework. Sponges cling to the coral trunks, their forms bulbous or branching, soft enough to sway slightly with the passing current. Their colors in the dim light resemble moss or lichen, an underwater version of the green cloak that covers old forests on land. Some sponges are older than they appear, their layers built up over centuries of filtering the sea. By drawing water through their porous bodies, they help cleanse and recirculate nutrients, acting as the forest's silent custodians. They make the corals look older still, as though draped in time. Together, these creatures, the ghostly fish, the invisible shrimp, the colossal yet delicate sea spiders, the serpentine eels, and the ancient sponges, form a community woven into the coral's every shadow. They do not disturb the forest stillness, they embody it. Each creature contributes to the system in ways gentle and subtle, balancing growth and decay, life and death, in a rhythm older than language. In their presence, the forest feels alive in a way that is not loud or bustling, but deep, patient, and aware. As we drift onward, another truth begins to reveal itself. The corals are not merely structures or habitats, they are archives. Every inch of their skeletons holds a story, thin layers of mineral laid down year after year, century after century. Much like the rings of a tree, these layers preserve a record of changing conditions in the ocean. Warm years, cold years, shifts in chemistry, fluctuations in currents. Scientists studying these patterns can read the past as though opening a book written in stone. The reef becomes not just a home for life, but a chronicle of ages. Even before the pyramids were raised, some of these corals had already been growing in the dark, tracing the slow pulse of the seas. They lived through ice ages, through climate shifts, through the changing tides of Earth's long story. While humanity was learning to shape tools and hunt and plant the first fields, these corals were already adding quiet layers to their skeletons, building towers that would outlast generations upon generations of human history. In their presence, our timelines feel small and fleeting, softened by humility. The branches we see now are not the work of a single lifetime. They are the product of many polyps born, growing, and fading, replaced by new ones that continue the structure without interruption. It is as though each coral is a lineage rather than an individual, a family tree literally sculpted into the water, rising through time with the patience of ancient dynasties. Each generation adds its piece, tiny and unhurried, building upward through the centuries. The living tips of these corals represent the youngest chapter of a saga written across thousands of years. And so each coral forest becomes a vast auditory record, not in sound, but in texture, chemistry, and form. A recording of temperature, nutrient flow, storm cycles, even distant volcanic eruptions. Everything that touched the ocean touched the coral. Every shift in the planet's pulse left a trace. When researchers analyze these structures, they find echoes of ages we barely understand, faint signatures of ancient waters sealed inside mineral layers like whispers locked in amber. Walking or drifting through this landscape thus becomes something more than exploration. It becomes communion. The coral forests speak in the language of slow creation, of eras stacked gently atop one another. In every branch and spiral, there is evidence of resilience, a testament that life endures even in the most shadowed corners of the world. And in each archway, each quiet alcove, each fallen trunk settling into the sea floor, there is an awareness of time not as a river rushing forward, but as a tide that rises and falls across eternity. The deeper we drift into this memory-filled world, the more the silence around us feels dense, almost reverent. Not empty, but full of stories, of cycles, of lives woven together in a tapestry too vast for any one moment to hold. The coral forests breathe slowly, speak quietly, and endure completely, holding the ocean's history in their bones. And we, small and transient in comparison, float gently among them, listening. The deeper we drift, the more the silence begins to feel like a presence of its own, soft, enveloping, and absolute. There is no sunlight here to scatter across the water, no shifting glow to signal hours passing. There is only darkness taking on the weight of a velvet curtain, and the faint pulsing hum of distant currents resonating through the deep. Even the sound of our own movement seems swallowed, absorbed into an environment evolved to exist without noise. It feels as though we have stepped into a cathedral built from water and shadow, where everything breathes slowly, reverently. In a world like this, survival demands a rhythm unlike anything on the surface. Energy is precious, scarce, unpredictable. And so the creatures of the deep move in gestures so small they are almost imperceptible. A fish pivots a fraction of a degree. An eel folds itself slightly deeper into a crevice. A small crustacean lifts a leg with careful restraint. Many of these beings travel only a few centimeters per minute, their lives unfolding at a pace that makes a whisper feel like a rush of wind. The calm is not forced, but embodied, woven into their biology, demanded by their environment. The corals themselves set the tone, their growth nearly frozen in time. A branch that extends only a few millimeters each year can still become a towering structure if given long enough. Centuries, even millennia. Their stillness is not the stillness of stone, though they resemble stone. It is the stillness of a process unfolding so slowly that no single moment captures its motion. Each tiny polyp works quietly, building its mineral skeleton grain by grain, devoting decades to a single inch of progress. If time had a physical form in the deep, it would look like coral, patient, unhurried, eternal. With no sun to rise or set, there is no day and no night, no seasons, no bloom of dawn or fading of dusk. Instead, there is only the continuity of darkness, a gentle, unbroken night that stretches across centuries. Creatures here know no circadian rhythm, no solar cues. Their bodies have adapted to the constancy of absence, living by instinct, chemistry, and the delicate patterns of food drifting through the void. In this world, existence slips free of the timekeeping we understand, becoming something looser, softer, almost fluid. And yet, even in the stillness, life persists. It persists not through abundance, but through an intricate web of subtle nourishment that finds its way into the deep. Cold currents move through the forest, like unseen rivers, carrying with them faint traces of food from faraway waters. These currents are the lifelines of the deep, sweeping across continents, traveling thousands of miles, dipping into trenches and rising again across vast underwater plains. They bring with them the memory of storms, the remnants of distant plankton blooms, the dissolved breath of creatures at the surface. When they pass through the coral forests, they deliver nutrients like a gentle wind, delivering seeds into a quiet grove. Falling from the world above is marine snow, organic particles drifting downward in a slow, endless snowfall. Tiny fragments of plants, animals, shells, and carbon-rich debris descend through the water column for weeks or even months before reaching the forest floor. By the time these particles arrive, they have softened, broken down, and transformed into fragile flecks of nourishment. They land on coral branches, settle into crevices, and stir gently with each passing current. The creatures here feed on this delicate precipitation the way a terrestrial forest might rely on morning dew. Sometimes, far above the deep, blooms of plankton erupt across the surface of the sea, flourishing in great drifting clouds. When these blooms eventually collapse, the remains begin their slow descent into the abyss. Days or weeks later, the deep sea forest experiences a subtle pulse of abundance, a temporary increase in particles, a bloom of microbial activity, a faint brightening of the ecosystem's hidden energy. It is a gift sent from far away, from a world the deep will never see, yet depends on all the same. Within the sediment and detritus, deep-sea bacteria work tirelessly, breaking down organic matter into simpler nutrients. These microscopic inhabitants are the unseen alchemists of the abyss, transforming what would otherwise sink uselessly into the dark into vital fuel. Their activity becomes the foundation upon which larger life can flourish. They convert death into sustenance, turning what has fallen from above into nourishment for what endures below. Every coral branch, every sponge, every drifting creature owes part of its survival to these invisible workers. And so the coral forests become natural collectors of food. Their branching limbs act like nets, catching marine snow and suspended particles drifting through the water. Small creatures come to graze among the branches, hunting for tiny morsels. Larger creatures follow, drawn to the pockets of life that form wherever coral slows the flow of water. In an ecosystem where energy is rare, the corals serve as gathering points, like oases in a vast nocturnal desert. As we drift through these corridors of mineral branches, what becomes most striking is the balance. Stillness paired with sustenance, darkness paired with quiet abundance. The rhythm of the forest is gentle, almost meditative. Life does not rush here. It expands and contracts in pulses defined by distant events, storms on the surface, seasonal cycles in faraway waters, subtle shifts in global currents. The deep forest listens, absorbs, and reacts, but never hastily. Its patience is its wisdom. The creatures that inhabit this world reflect that wisdom. A small fish hovers motionless, conserving every scrap of energy, drifting only when absolutely necessary. A delicate amphipod clings to a branch, letting the current bring food directly to its waiting limbs. Even predators are unhurried, moving with a ghostly grace that feels more like drifting than hunting. Each being has shaped its existence around scarcity, around silence, around the constant need to endure. In this way, the deep forest reveals a truth that is both humbling and strangely comforting. Life does not need light to thrive. It does not need warmth or speed or complexity. It needs only balance between growth and decay, between pulse and stillness, between what arrives from above and what rises from below. The riddle of the deep is that it seems empty, yet it is full. It seems motionless, yet it breathes. It seems lifeless, yet everything here is alive in its own quiet, deliberate way. The longer we linger, the more we feel the rhythm of this place begin to soften our own. Our breath slows, our thoughts settle. The weight of the world above feels far away. And as the gentle currents drift past, carrying their faint threads of nourishment, the deep forest continues its eternal work, growing millimeter by millimeter, feeding on the snow of the sea, sheltering the patient creatures that have learned to call this darkness home. Here, time holds its breath, and we drift with it, unhurried, listening to the quiet pulse of a world that thrives in shadow. Black coral appears gradually as we drift deeper, rising from the sea floor like a forest conjured out of shadow. Unlike the vibrant corals of shallow reefs, these beings wear no bright colors. They stand in quiet elegance, their skeletons dark as ebony wood polished by centuries of flowing water. In the soft halo of a submersible's lamps, their surfaces blush with a faint silver sheen, as if dusted by moonlight filtered through miles of sea. Each branch seems carved from darkness itself, a sculpture of shadow holding its shape against the endless pressure of the deep. Their limbs are slender, yet astonishingly strong. Though only a few millimeters thick, they withstand pressures that could crush metal. Their resilience, built through mineral layering so patient and perfect that no human hand could replicate it. When currents move through the forces, the branches tremble slightly, not in fear, but in acknowledgement, as if whispering with the water. For this reason, deep-sea divers sometimes call them the evergreen trees of the abyss, not because they resemble pines in color, but because their silhouettes rise in tapering spires, reaching upward with the quiet confidence of conifers standing on a snowy mountain. Some of these coral structures tower 2 or even 3 meters tall, their trunks thick at the base before splitting into elegant forks of delicate branches. When seen together, these colonies resemble ancient trees in a midnight grove, their limbs stretching out as though tracing patterns in the dark. Swimming between them feels like walking through a forest where the world has forgotten the existence of day. And yet, despite their delicate appearance, each coral has endured centuries of constant pressure, steady currents, and drifting sediments that would wear down anything less perfectly adapted. The mystery of black coral lies not only in its appearance, but in its silence. It grows without demanding attention, without vibrant pigments or flamboyant shapes. It flourishes in a world where light cannot reach, building its architecture from minerals gathered grain by grain. When we glide through the forest, the branches appear almost still, but they are not. Polyps, tiny creatures that make up the coral, extend their soft arms to catch drifting particles, retracting and opening again in a rhythm too subtle for the hurried eye. Their work is quiet, deliberate, and endless. These forests form slowly, carefully, over timescales that almost defy imagination. Each towering coral begins as a speck, a polyp smaller than a grain of dust, floating through the water until it finds a place to anchor. Once settled, it begins to secrete minerals that form a tiny cup of skeleton. One polyp becomes 2, then many, each adding its own minute layer of structure. Over centuries, the framework grows upward and outward, transforming from a delicate twig into a pillar that will one day shelter entire communities of deep-sea life. Currents determine the shape of these growing structures. Just as winds sculpt the forms of trees on cliffs and mountains, underwater flows push and guide the coral branches, encouraging them to angle in certain directions, curl into gentle arcs, or stretch toward nutrient-rich pathways. A branch that meets a steady directional current may grow long and sweeping, while one exposed to circular flow may twist into a spiral. In this way, the forest becomes a map of the sea's invisible movement, its architecture shaped by the daily breath of the deep. When an old coral dies after centuries of quiet persistence, its skeleton remains standing for a long while before eventually breaking apart. These fallen pillars settle on the seabed, where they become part of the soft sediment, mixing with fragments of shell and organic snow. Over time, they form a kind of mineral soil, a nourishing bed where new coral larvae can land and take root. Thus, the dead nourish the living, and the forest renews itself in a cycle as slow and profound as geological time. The floor beneath us is layered with the memories of forests long vanished, each generation feeding the next. New coral forests often arise in places where the terrain is rough, fields of scattered rock, steep underwater cliffs, the sides of seamounts. These uneven landscapes give larvae places to anchor and shield young colonies from the scouring power of passing currents. Soon, small clusters of coral form like saplings on a rugged hillside, spaced unevenly, yet connected by the flow of water that passes among them. Over centuries, they expand outwards, their branches mingling until they become a continuous grove. Many of the grandest forests grow where currents intersect, secret crossroads of the abyss, where nutrient-rich streams collide, mingle, and drift. These junctions act like crossroads in a terrestrial woodland, places where seeds collect and life thrives. Here, the coral colonies grow taller, thicker, more robust, nourished by the constant infusion of drifting particles. They become towering stands of dark branches reaching upward, forming living canopies that sway gently in a cold, eternal night. These meeting points of currents serve as birthplaces for entire ecosystems, drawing creatures from all directions who come seeking shelter, food, or a momentary resting place in the quiet arms of the forest. The formation of these forests happens on a timescale we are not accustomed to observing. Years become centuries. Centuries become eras. A coral that begins as a speck today may one day rise above the seabed like a monument, its branches home to creatures that will be born long after we are gone. The deep sea moves slowly, but it remembers everything. Each coral, each fallen skeleton, each curve shaped by flowing water holds a piece of the ocean story. To witness the forest in mid-formation is to see patience crystallized. Small clusters of polyps gather on rock faces, forming tiny skeletons that resemble fragile forks of mineral lace. Slightly older colonies nearby stretch upward like saplings sensing the direction of an unseen sun. Still older pillars stand firm, their bases thick and sturdy, their branches split and resplit into intricate fractals. The entire forest represents a timeline that spans generations, an underwater chronicle of life unfolding at the pace of stone. And as we drift through these shifting paths, past young colonies that are mere whispers of what they will become, past ancient towers that have already lived longer than most species on land, we feel the magnitude of time in a way that is difficult to feel at the surface. In the deep forest, time is not a line moving forward. It is a presence that surrounds us, shapes us, and gently reminds us of our briefness. The black coral forests rise and fall across millennia, quietly sculpting the deep into a labyrinth of shadowed branches and mineral spires. They stand like ancient guardians of memory, growing from specks into structures tall enough to change the seafloor's flow, offering shelter, nourishment, and continuity to generations of creatures who will never know sunlight. Their existence is a testament to life's ability to adapt, endure, and flourish in places where nothing seems possible. And so we drift onward, the silhouettes of these dark trees swaying gently around us, their branches whispering not in sound, but in form, a language of patience, resilience, and deep, abiding quiet. As we continue drifting through the forest, new shapes begin to appear between the branches, shapes that move with a tenderness so delicate it feels more imagined than real. A batfish glides past first, its body curved like a fallen petal, fluttering gently in a slow current. It tilts from side to side as though caught in a perpetual dance, mimicking the movement of a leaf drifting through autumn air. Every motion seems unhurried, as if the ocean itself were cradling it, guiding its fall through the silent canopy of coral limbs. Farther ahead, a faint glimmer appears, a soft red glow pulsing in the black. It is a deep-sea dragonfish, one of the few creatures capable of producing red bioluminescence, a color invisible to most other beings. To our eyes, it flickers like a lone firefly wandering through a moonless forest, carrying its secret lantern across the abyss. The glow outlines its slender form before fading again, leaving behind only the impression of light drifting through water, like a memory dissolving back into shadow. Nestled against the coral branches, anemones sway with an elegance that seems almost shy. Their tentacles bloom in soft plumes, pale greens, muted violets, faintly visible in the submersible's diffused beam. They cling to the coral like wildflowers anchored to the trunks of ancient trees, turning the skeletal forest into a garden tended only by the tides. When currents pass through, their bodies ripple gently, petals stirred by a breeze that exists only in the deep. Near the base of one towering coral pillar, a nudibranch appears, adorned in velvety blacks and purples that shimmer as if dusted with starlight. Its surface glows faintly, like a petal made of midnight ink. Each motion is deliberate, almost ceremonial, as it grazes along the coral surface in slow arcs. Though small, its colors carry an otherworldly richness, a reminder that even in a world without sunlight, beauty finds ways to express itself in shadows. Just beneath a branch, a tiny scorpion shrimp hides in the soft dimness, its body striped and compact, ready to tuck itself even deeper into crevices if disturbed. It watches the world through large, curious eyes, sensing vibrations more than sight. These shrimp are the caretakers of the forest floor, scavenging fragments, cleaning surfaces, and unwittingly shaping the delicate balance of life in the grove. Each time the current shifts, they move like quiet caretakers rearranging fallen leaves. All these creatures, leaf-like fish, lantern-bearing predators, soft anemone blossoms, dark velvet nudibranchs, and the small custodians of the forest floor, exist not in isolation, but as part of a complex, interwoven community. Their lives overlap, intertwine, and depend on the coral's enduring presence. The branches provide shelter, the currents bring food, and the creatures in turn groom, clean, nourish, and animate the forest. This is not a place of chaos or competition. It is a world of delicate symbiosis, where every gesture contributes to the whole. But for all its quiet beauty, this forest is fragile, perhaps more fragile than any landscape we know. The first hint of vulnerability lies in the coral's own nature. They grow so incredibly slowly that a single careless disturbance could erase centuries of life. A branch broken by a passing trawl net, a cloud of sediment stirred up by machinery, a shift in temperature. Each could undo what thousands of years have patiently built. The deep forest does not have the luxury of rapid healing. Its rhythm is too slow, its resources too scarce. Destruction happens in moments, but growth requires ages. Warming oceans pose another threat, subtle at first but devastating over time. Even a small increase in temperature can stress deep-sea corals, altering the chemistry of the water around them, slowing their growth, weakening their polyps. These forests, which have endured ice ages and ancient climatic shifts, now face changes happening at a pace far beyond anything they evolved to withstand. Slowly, quietly, colonies begin to fade, branches losing their vitality, polyps retracting for longer periods, growth halting like breath held too long. Yet perhaps the greatest danger comes from below. Deep-sea trawling, with its heavy nets and steel equipment, can sweep across the seabed in minutes, crushing coral pillars that took 4,000 years to rise. Entire forests can be flattened, leaving behind a wasteland of broken skeletons and drifting particles. What was once a thriving world of spires and branches becomes a plain of fragments, silent, empty, irrecoverable in any human timescale. The thought of it is a quiet ache, as though witnessing a library burn before the books could be read. As the oceans absorb more carbon dioxide, their waters become more acidic. Coral skeletons, though strong, depend on delicate chemical balances to maintain their structure. Increased acidity dissolves the minerals they rely on, weakening their frames until branches become brittle, fragile enough to break under their own weight. What once could withstand the crushing force of the deep may, in time, crumble from within. The forest, resilient in so many ways, becomes vulnerable in one it cannot defend against. Even the currents shift. As climate patterns change, the great underwater rivers that deliver nutrients may alter their routes, leaving some forests stranded in deserts of still water. Without the constant rain of marine snow, without the gentle sweep of drifting particles, the corals starve. Polyps close more often than they open. The creatures that depend on them move away or die. The forest grows quiet, not with serenity, but with absence. In this place of grandeur and endurance, fragility feels like a paradox. Yet, it is that very fragility that makes the deep forest so extraordinary. Its beauty is not born of abundance, but of persistence. Its ability to flourish in a world of darkness, scarcity, and pressure. Every branch we pass has survived countless centuries of quiet adversity. Every creature we encounter has mastered the art of living slowly and gently enough to not upset the balance. To move through this world is to feel a profound tenderness, not only toward the life that surrounds us, but toward time itself. The deep forest is a reminder that some of the most extraordinary places on Earth are also the most vulnerable, that their endurance is not guaranteed, and that their silence carries both wisdom and warning. And as we continue drifting, the forest sways subtly with the dark currents, its creatures rising and falling in delicate arcs. The sight is beautiful, but it carries the echo of something else, a quiet plea, woven into the branches like breath into wind. Protect what endures slowly, for its loss would be eternal. The deep forest stretches on, ancient and fragile, waiting in the dark, and we drift with it, feeling its beauty, feeling its peril, and understanding, perhaps for the first time, how rare such quiet worlds truly are. As we journey farther through these shadowed groves, it becomes clear that the deep-sea forests are not confined to a single corner of the world. They rise in secret places across the globe, each shaped by the waters that cradle them, each carrying its own quiet personality. One of the most ancient forests lies near Hawaii, where black corals grow older than any others known to science. Some colonies here began their lives more than 4,000 years ago, long before metal tools were shaped by human hands, long before the stars were charted into constellations. Their branches bear the weight of time itself, dark and intricate, holding within them the memory of ages. Across the world, in the Mediterranean, the coral forests take on a different form. They grow low and compact, like underwater bonsai groves. Their branches twist into dense miniature thickets that resemble the careful, deliberate artistry of gardeners, though here, nature is the sculptor, shaping each curve through slow, persistent currents. Swimming through these tight clusters feels like wandering through an ancient courtyard carved into the sea. Each coral a tiny tree perfected over centuries of stillness. Far to the north, in the icy fjords of Norway, the forests cling to steep underwater slopes where glacial water pours in, cold and dense. These fjord corals thrive in near-freezing temperatures, rising in pale silhouettes through waters so dark they appear carved from ink. The contrast between their quiet ivory branches and the black fjord depths gives the impression of winter trees growing beneath a frozen sky. The meltwater that flows above them carries nutrients from the land, feeding the forest just as a mountain runoff nourishes the pines and birches above the surface. To the south, off the coast of New Zealand, coral towers rise like monuments. Here, some structures stretch meters upward, their bases heavy and thick, their upper branches opening like the stonework of ancient temples. Drifting through them feels like gliding between the pillars of a submerged cathedral. These towering colonies have endured the slow rise and fall of undersea mountains, anchoring themselves to ridges where the currents bring steady nourishment. They stand tall, like sentinels, observing eras of unseen change. And scattered across the underwater mountain ranges of the North Pacific lie some of the most surreal forests of all. Vast fields of coral sprouting from volcanic spires. These regions, sometimes called living stone forests, stretch across the slopes of long dormant seamounts. The corals here glow with soft whites and muted silvers, coating the rugged terrain in a luminous frost. When the light from a submersible sweeps across them, the landscape resembles a meadow of pale, crystalline trees frozen in mid-sway. It is a world as quiet as moonlight on snow, yet alive with secrets. Each of these forests, no matter where it grows, carries with it a piece of the oceans they inhabit. The waters sculpt their shapes, carve their shadows, weave their rhythms. And though they lie in distant places, they share a common thread. They flourish unseen, in darkness, asking for nothing but time. As we linger among these global groves, another layer of wonder unfolds. Subtle phenomena that transform the forest into something even more dreamlike. Marine snow continues to drift from far above, falling in delicate flakes that swirl between the branches. In the dimness, it resembles mist settling over a forest floor at dawn. Some particles catch on coral limbs, gathering like soft frost. Others continue their slow descent, creating shifting veils of shimmering dust. Watching the snow fall here feels like observing the ocean breathe. Each flake a quiet exhale, each drift a moment suspended outside of time. Then, between the branches, faint pinpricks of blue-green light flicker. These are not reflections, but living sparks, bioluminescent bacteria and plankton, releasing gentle radiance into the dark. They glow like tiny fireflies moving through the night, appearing only long enough to remind us that life, no matter how small, can still find ways to shine. Their presence turns the forest into a twilight garden, lit from within by organisms far too small to see clearly, yet bright enough to alter the mood of the entire world around them. A school of small fish passes overhead, flowing in a tight, swirling pattern. Their movement resembles a gust of wind passing through treetops, creating ripples of silver as they pivot in unison. The current beneath them stirs sedimental dust from the seafloor, lifting it into the water where it coils upward like mist rising from a forest path. For a moment, the lights of the submersible illuminate the drifting plume, making it appear like fog rolling over roots in a twilight woodland. In the distance, a fissure in the seafloor cuts through the forest like the opening of a hidden valley. The walls rise steep and jagged, coated with corals that cling to the stone like frost blooming on cliffs at night. The crevice twists and narrows, forming passages that resemble the corridors of a mythic garden, an enchanted labyrinth, sculpted not by magic, but by pressure, water, and time. Within these underwater canyons, the coral branches arch inward, forming vaulted corridors reminiscent of carved temples and ancient grottos. It is easy to imagine that these are paths walked by creatures from forgotten eras, drifting through the shadows in timeless grace. Even the way the sediment moves in these chasms transforms the landscape. When the currents shift, the fine particles gathered at the bottom roll upward in delicate spirals, forming shimmering clouds that hug the coral trunks like low-lying fog. As the mist rises, the entire forest appears to breathe out, exhaling soft ghosts of mineral and memory. These phenomena layer beauty upon beauty, turning an already extraordinary world into something close to a dream. Everything here feels both grounded and ethereal. Snow that falls underwater, fireflies that never surface, winds made of swimming fish, fog made of ancient dust. The deep forest blends the familiar with the unimaginable, creating scenes that resemble memories of places we have walked, though we know we never have. And as we float through this realm, between bonsai groves, in Mediterranean silence, beneath towering cathedrals off New Zealand's coast, across frost-white meadows in the North Pacific, the ocean reveals itself not as a single world, but as countless worlds nested within one another. Each forest a chapter, each phenomenon a whispered sentence, each drifting particle a syllable in the long, quiet language of the deep. We drift on, weightless among these wonders, carrying with us the feeling that the sea is not merely a place, but an endless story, one we are only beginning to hear. As the forest stretches around us in its silvered stillness, another truth begins to unfold. This place is not merely beautiful, it is essential. In the deep, where open waters offer little shelter, the coral forests create a rare architecture, branches and tunnels, alcoves and towers that cradle life in 3 dimensions. Small snails cling to the lower stems, their shells catching tiny grains of drifting snow. Juvenile fish hide among the limbs, safe from predators that prowl the emptier plains. These young creatures use the forest the way saplings use the roots and shadows of tall trees, as a sanctuary, a nursery, a quiet cradle where life may begin slowly and safely. The branches redirect currents, slowing the flow of water just enough for food to gather there, suspended like dust motes in a sunbeam. Even the smallest of these drifting particles becomes nourishment for someone. Tiny crustaceans graze on them, soft-bodied worms filter them, and larger creatures follow, drawn to the places where food lingers. In this way, the forest feeds not only those who live in its shadows, but also those who pass nearby, sweeping in to harvest what the coral has patiently collected. It becomes a hub of energy in an otherwise sparse world. Deep coral forests also play a quiet but powerful role in the carbon cycle. Their skeletons, built from layers of calcium carbonate, trap carbon for centuries, even millennia. Each branch rising from the seafloor represents carbon pulled from the water long ago, stored safely in mineral form. When a coral dies, its skeleton often remains intact for ages, continuing to lock away carbon even as it slowly becomes part of the sediment. Over spans of time unimaginable to us, these forests become long-term vaults for carbon, helping stabilize the oceans they inhabit. In their steadfast presence, the coral structures also anchor the seafloor. Their network of branches and fallen trunks hold sediments in place, reducing erosion caused by shifting currents. Without them, the seabed would be far more volatile, its sands stirred up into great clouds that smother life and erase habitats. The forest quiets the water, settles the dust, and creates pockets of stability where fragile creatures can thrive. It is easy to think of it as static, but in truth, it is constantly shaping and restoring the world around it. Their influence extends outward far beyond their own borders. By capturing drifting particles and slowing currents, the coral forests indirectly support ecosystems many kilometers away. They shape nutrient availability, affect sediment distribution, and provide stepping stones for traveling species. Even creatures that never enter the forest rely on the life that gathers here, feeding on the young fish that grow among the branches or on the organic material that the forest releases into the water. The forest is a heart, slow beating, nearly silent, but vital. And now, as we imagine ourselves drifting even deeper into this world, the space around us shifts from understanding to sensation. The forest becomes not a concept, but a place we move through, a dream we inhabit for a moment of suspended breath. Black coral rises on either side of us, forming dark corridors that feel almost architectural, like ancient hallways carved into the bones of the ocean. Their branches fan outward and upwards, their silhouettes creating doorways and archways as naturally as trees form pathways in a woodland. As the submersible glides between them, the beams of its light sweep across the branches, casting elongated shadows that stretch away like fingers into the void. For a moment, the forest seems to rearrange itself around us, shifting its form with every angle of light. A pale fish slips across our path, a fleeting blur of white against the dark columns. It moves with the stillness of a passing thought, gliding between pillars, as though it were a ghost wandering the aisles of an underwater temple. The brief shimmer of its scales catches the light before it vanishes again, swallowed by quiet. In its wake, it leaves a soft ripple of motion, like the faint echo of footsteps in a long abandoned corridor. The light from the submersible reflects on the coral branches in shimmering arcs, creating a gentle illusion of moonlight passing through treetops. The effect is delicate, impossible on land, yet strangely familiar, like wandering through a nighttime forest where the moon is always rising but never fully appearing. The coral trunks glow faintly, touched with silver, while the deeper shadows remain thick and velvety, a soft canvas against which every movement becomes meaningful. We pass an ancient pillar of coral, its branches broken near the base. It lies tilted on the sea floor, its skeleton partially covered by sediments, but still elegant in its decay. The broken trunk resembles a fallen tree in a terrestrial forest, aged, softened by time, but beautiful in the way that only old things can be. Even in ruin, it provides shelter. Small fish dart beneath its ribs, and tiny crustaceans crawl across its fractured limbs. It is not an end, but a transformation. The water grows so quiet that for a moment, it feels as though the world has paused. The hum of the submersible is faint, a low heartbeat in a chamber carved from darkness. In this stillness, the sound of our own breath becomes noticeable. The rhythm of air moving through our chest, the soft pulse in our ears. It feels as though we can hear our heart, not as a noise, but as a sensation, a presence pressing gently against the silence. The forest accepts our presence without judgment. It has existed long before us and will, with hope, endure long after. Here, in this slow midnight world, every motion is softened, every detail magnified. The coral trunks stand tall and patient. The fish drift like thoughts. The particles fall like snow, caught in stasis. Even the smallest gesture feels like it belongs to a larger choreography, an ancient dance shaped not by speed or sunlight, but by the deep's unwavering calm. Moving through this underwater grove, we feel the boundary between observer and participant blur. We are no longer separate from the forest. We are part of its silence, its rhythm, its unhurried breath. For a moment, it becomes impossible to imagine the surface world, the noise, the urgency, the glaring brightness. Down here, time folds in on itself, wrapped gently around the coral pillars like drifting silt. And in the hush, in the slow grace of our passage, a profound understanding settles in. This forest, older than empires and quieter than dreams, is a reminder that nature writes some of its most extraordinary stories where no eyes can see. The deep does not need to be illuminated to be magnificent. It needs only to exist in its patient, enduring darkness, holding its secrets in branching hands, whispering them to whoever drifts close enough to listen. We continue forward, deeper into the quiet corridors of the forest, carrying with us a reverence that feels almost instinctive, as though this place has touched something ancient within us, something that recognizes the beauty of stillness, the wisdom of slow growth, the power of shadows that cradle life instead of hiding it. As we drift farther into this world of shadowed branches, the forest begins revealing its quiet miracles, rare truths that feel almost impossible, yet have unfolded patiently in this unseen darkness. Somewhere in these depths, there exists a coral colony older than recorded history, more than 4,200 years of uninterrupted life. It began growing before the pyramids were raised, before the first alphabets took shape, before humankind carved meaning into stone. Layer by layer, it built itself upward, surviving eras that we know only through fragments and speculation. In its branches, the deep holds the memory of continents shifting, ice sheets advancing and retreating, and oceans rewriting their currents again and again. Some forests stretch for kilometers, spreading across the seabed like valleys of living stone. Their silhouettes rise and fall in gentle waves, matching the contours of underwater mountains. Drifting through them feels like gliding over a vast woodland at twilight, an expanse so large that the edges seem to fade into perpetual night. The branches pitch and yaw with the slow pulse of the sea, creating the illusion of wind moving through treetops. It is a vastness that humbles the mind, reminding us of how little we truly know of the world beneath us. And yet, within these sprawling forests, individual colonies can reach astonishing heights. Some corals grow taller than a person, 2 meters, sometimes more, forming pillars as large as the beams of an ancient temple. Their branches stretch outward like vaulted rafters, their bases widen to anchor them against the heavy push of the currents. To swim near one is to stand in the presence of something monumental, a living structure shaped not by hands, but by the slow insistence of time. One branch alone may be older than every city ever built by humankind. It might have begun as a speck at a time when our ancestors wandered across plains with stone tools, lighting fires under unfamiliar stars. Its growth remembers cold eras and warm ones, remembers when ocean chemistry shifted, remembers volcanic ash settling from distant eruptions. These branches hold the story of Earth not in words but in layers of mineral, thin rings stacked like whispers inside a cathedral spire. Though they have never once met the sun, the forests still glow with a quiet brilliance. Their beauty does not rely on color, but on form, the shimmer of silver where beams of artificial light brush the branches, the gentle scatter of marine snow slipping between limbs, the slow sway of the entire grove in the breath of deep currents. This is a world that shines without brightness, radiates without flame, holds wonder without needing to be seen. Its radiance is not visual, but emotional, a glimmer, felt, rather than observed. And as we let these extraordinary facts settle in the mind, the forest shifts once more, turning our attention toward the long story of how such beings came to exist at all. Deep-sea corals, unlike many of their shallow water cousins, trace their lineage back to prehistoric oceans. Their ancestors thrived in waters that bore little resemblance to today's seas. Some evolved during epochs when continents sat in unfamiliar arrangements, when vast inland seas cut across the land, when the deep was ruled by creatures now long extinct. To drift among these corals is to walk through a living museum, one where the exhibits have grown and breathed continuously for millions of years. These ancient lineages carry subtle traits unseen in modern shallow reefs. Some can withstand immense pressure, others flourish in near-freezing water. Some build skeletons with unique patterns of minerals, and others evolve polyps adapted to catching food in the faintest of currents. Each adaptation is a response to a deep sea world that changes slowly but relentlessly, a world shaped by geological rhythms rather than solar cycles. The forest is filled with organisms whose features seem almost alien. A coral limb might branch in fractal patterns reminiscent of ancient fossils, spirals, and forks that mirrored designs etched in stone hundreds of millions of years ago. A small creature living in its shadow might possess sensory organs rarely seen in sunlit species, inherited from ancestors that navigated oceans before fish even developed jaws. In their presence, the deep feels like a cradle of experimentation, where evolution has written drafts of life in silence and left them here, preserved in darkness. Some families of coral have endured multiple mass extinctions, surviving events that wiped out most of the life on Earth. When shallow reefs vanished and climates shifted catastrophically, these deep-sea survivors continued their slow growth, untouched by chaos that reshaped the world above. They are evidence that resilience often blooms in unexpected places, nurtured not by abundance, but by stability, patience, and the quiet constancy of a world without light. In this way, the forest becomes more than a habitat. It becomes a chronicle of persistence. Every living branch represents a lineage refined across epochs, shaped by pressures we cannot feel and time frames we cannot fathom. The creatures that dwell among the branches carry histories older than mountains, older than deserts, older than many of the forms of life familiar to us on land. As we drift through the dimness, the forest feels like an archive whose pages we can touch but never fully read, a record of evolutionary experiments, triumphs, failures, and survivals spanning the deep history of Earth. Its branches hold echoes of ancient seas. Its inhabitants bear the marks of worlds long vanished, and its silence is filled with the presence of time itself. To witness these beings is to stand in the shadow of evolution's oldest artistry. It is to feel the weight of deep time pressing gently against your awareness, not as a burden, but as a soft, expansive stillness. It is to realize that the story of life is not solely written in sunlight. Much of it has been authored here in the cold twilight beneath the world, where slow persistence becomes a form of brilliance. And as the currents guide us onward, the forest continues to unspool its ancient tale, inviting us to imagine all the eras it has survived and all the quiet millennia yet to come. As we drift onward, the deep forest begins whispering memories of another world, one we know more intimately, one we can walk through with our own feet. Despite existing beneath crushing pressure and eternal night, the coral forests echo the great forests on land in ways that feel uncanny. Their branches rise in fractal patterns, splitting and resplitting with the same mathematical grace that governs the limbs of ancient oaks and towering redwoods. The geometry is shared, as though both coral and tree were following an old instruction written into the blueprint of nature itself. Between the coral pillars, shadows pool in soft gradients, cast by the shapes of branching limbs. In the deep, these shadows become pockets of shelter, where tiny creatures drift and hide, snails, larvae, shy crustaceans, seeking comfort beneath the coral's protective canopy. Much like saplings gathering under the shade of great trees, life flourishes where the branches filter the flow of the world around them. Even without the presence of light, a kind of shadow still exists here, defined by movement and form rather than brightness. When a coral dies, its skeleton becomes part of the seabed, breaking slowly into fragments that enrich the surrounding sediment. This mineral debris becomes a kind of nourishment, a substrate where new polyps settle and another generation begins to grow. The cycle mirrors the fall of trees in a forest, where trunks soften into soil that feeds future roots. In both realms, sea and land, death transforms, becoming the quiet foundation of new life. The forest continues not by resisting change, but by folding it gently into the earth or into the sea. Both types of forests build themselves vertically and horizontally, layering life in stories stacked one atop another. On land, insects, mosses, birds, mammals, and fungi inhabit different heights of the woodland structure. In the deep, small fish, shrimp, anemones, worms, and drifting plankton weave their separate lives among different levels of coral branches. Each layer sees the world from a different vantage point, yet all depend on one another, forming a network of symbiosis that is neither loud nor chaotic, but harmoniously slow. And walking or drifting through either forest humbles us in the same way. Among the towering pillars of coral, or beneath the enormous trunks of terrestrial trees, we feel our size diminish. The world expands around us, not through force, but through age and depth. The forest stretches beyond our comprehension, inviting us to step lightly, breathe slower, and listen to something older than ourselves. Whether swaying branches above or mineral spires below, the sensation is similar. We are guests, wandering through a domain shaped by time rather than intention. The deeper we move into the grove, the more the quiet becomes a presence we can almost touch. Here, in the abyss, the forest exists in perpetual solitude. There are no seasons, no autumns to redden leaves, no springs to unfurl new fronds. Time's passage is written not in cycles, but in accumulation, in layers that press gently upon one another across centuries. The forest lives in a single endless moment of darkness that stretches like a ribbon through millennia. There is no rustling wind, no birdsong, no creaking branches. Sound fades into the weight of the water, dampened until only the soft movement of currents remains. The forest silence is not empty. It is full of stillness, full of the delicate energy of things that grow without haste. Even the subtlest motion, a drifting fish, a distant swirl of sediment, feels amplified against the quiet, as though the deep itself were holding its breath. There is no sunlight here, no warm glow to illuminate the world. Instead, there is the faint gleam of the submersible's lights reflecting off coral surfaces, creating soft halos that ripple like moonlight across stone. Occasionally, a creature emits a brief flash of bioluminescence, a small, glowing punctuation in the dark. But even these lights feel modest, hesitant, respectful of the vast night that surrounds them. Nothing here is flamboyant, nothing demands attention. The forest thrives through subtlety. Life in this place does not announce itself. It hides them in folds of shadow, reveals itself only in patient gestures, appears and disappears like thoughts passing through a half-dream. Creatures exist not to impress, but to endure, their adaptations elegant in their restraint. Their colors are muted, their movements unhurried, their forms shaped by a world where energy is sacred and extravagance impossible. And yet, despite this quiet modesty, every structure in the forest feels like a work of art. Coral branches arch toward invisible currents, bending in shapes that mimic the sweep of calligraphy. Spirals form naturally, as though sculpted by a deliberate hand. Even broken pillars retain a kind of poetic silhouette, soft angles worn by silt, curves shaped by centuries of water flowing across their surfaces. In darkness, these forms take on a gentle radiance, not of color, but of presence. They feel intentional, expressive, alive with meaning. As we drift deeper, the forest seems to expand into a realm where sound, light, and time are rewritten. The quiet feels infinite. The darkness feels soft. The slow movement of water becomes the only measure of the world's pulse. This is solitude, but it is not loneliness. It is a form of peace the surface world rarely offers. A peace so profound that it feels like being cradled by the planet itself. Here, in this sanctuary of shadow, beauty reveals itself not in brilliance, but in restraint. It radiates from the patience of things that grow millimeter by millimeter. It glimmers in the soft angles of branches shaped by 1,000 years of current. It flickers in the rare lights of hidden creatures. It whispers in the flow of silt rising from the forest floor. And as we float through this still, sculpted world, moving between pillars that have stood longer than civilizations, we begin to feel a subtle transformation within ourselves. Something softens, something listens, something remembers what it means to be small in the presence of time made visible. The deep forest holds its solitude gently, and in doing so, it offers us a glimpse of a kind of beauty that exists only in darkness, unseen, uncelebrated, yet achingly profound. For all the wonder held within these shadowed groves, humanity has seen only the faintest sliver of them. Most of the deep ocean remains uncharted, vast expanses of darkness untouched by any light, even the artificial beams of our submersibles. The forests lie hidden in trenches, on seamounts, along continental slopes, in underwater canyons where few have traveled. Each journey into these depths is an exploration not just of a place, but of the boundaries of our imagination. In the past, the ocean floor was little more than a blank canvas, an idea, a rumor, a void too remote to understand. But the emergence of sonar mapping and deep diving vehicles opened the door to a reality more intricate than we could have dreamed. Sonar reveals faint outlines, ridges, towers, shapes that hint at life but remain ambiguous. Submersibles fill in the details, drifting close enough for cameras to catch the shimmer of coral or the flicker of a passing fish. Each new expedition uncovers something unexpected, an unfamiliar species, a towering grove, a fragment of an ancient structure still standing after thousands of years. With every discovery, our assumptions about the deep unravel. We once imagined the abyss as barren, featureless, devoid of complexity. Instead, we find forests rising like sculptures, ecosystems unfolding with delicate precision. Creatures evolve through pathways we never predicted. The deep sea forces us to let go of the idea that we understand Earth's limits. It reminds us that beneath our continents, beneath the weather and sunlight and daily rhythms, lies another world, older, darker, slower, and infinitely more mysterious. This world is also vulnerable, slipping toward fragility even as we begin to see it clearly. Some forests may vanish before we fully comprehend their secrets. Others may be touched only once before currents shift or climates change, erasing structures that took millennia to grow. The urgency is quiet, but it presses gently against the edges of our awareness. We are witnessing something extraordinary and fleeting. To know that these forests might disappear before we catalogue their wonders is to feel a sorrow as soft as the darkness that surrounds them. The deeper we drift into this realization, the more the forest feels like a teacher, one reminding us that knowledge is not ownership, that discovery is not dominion. We are guests here, peering into a realm that has persisted long without us and will persist only if we respect the delicate balance that sustains it. The coral branches sway as though nodding to this truth, acknowledging our passing presence without yielding any claim to it. And so, as we begin the slow ascent from the forest, the scene gently shifts around us. The towering silhouettes of coral start to fade into shadow, their edges softened by distance. Their dark forms resemble ancient columns receding down a long hallway, each one dissolving a little more as the water dims their outline. What once felt immense now becomes dreamlike, softened by the slow pull of separation. The branches closest to us blur first, melting into soft strokes of silver and black. Farther pillars appear faint, like the memory of tall trees glimpsed through fog. The forest, which moments ago felt so present, so solid, now seems to retreat into its own 1,000-year silence. The water grows lighter as we drift upward. The pressure loosens its hold. The darkness thins into a dim cobalt haze. Small particles continue to fall, but the snow seems finer now, less dense, like the last flecks of a passing storm. The currents, once heavy and cold, now flow with gentle emotion, stirring the water in slow, graceful ribbons. Our ascent feels almost like rising through the aisles of a submerged temple, leaving behind altars carved from coral and stone, their guardians watching silently as we drift away. The black forest remains below, rooted in its vast, quiet domain, untouched by our departure. It does not reach upward or cling to our presence. It simply stays, still, ancient, enduring, holding its secrets as gently as it holds its creatures. The dark branches fold once more into the dimness, becoming soft shadows, then fading entirely, until only the memory of their form lingers behind our closed eyes, and we carry something with us as we rise, not knowledge alone, but a feeling, a deep, steady calm, as though the forest has breathed its rhythm into our bodies. It is the same peace one might feel upon leaving a remote shrine or an old cathedral. where the air seemed filled with something sacred and patient. The sensation follows us upward, out of the darkness, into water that glows faintly with returning light. We rise, but a part of us remains below, drifting still between the ancient pillars of coral, listening to the slow pulse of a world that thrives without sunlight. And in that quiet connection, we feel ourselves softened, humbled, and gently changed. The forest stays where it has always been, silent, enduring, waiting in the deep. And we, carrying its calm within us, continue upward toward the edge of the closing story. As you gently drift upward, take one last look at the forest below, those dark coral pillars rising like ancient stone columns in an eternal night. They remain unmoving, unhurried, suspended in the quiet of millennia. In the dim blue distance, their silhouettes linger, soft, solemn, and impossibly patient, like a dream carved into the deep. The water around you grows lighter now, carrying you slowly toward the surface, yet a part of the deep follows you, a calm that settles in the chest, a quiet that softens every thought. Let that stillness stay with you, long after the ocean's darkness fades. It is a reminder that silence can be gentle, and that some worlds exist not to dazzle, but to soothe. Imagine the coral forest below, continuing its slow breath in the shadows, untouched by the rise and fall of daylight. Those ancient pillars will remain there, steady and unseen, long after we've returned to our bright and hurried world. And as you leave the deep behind, hold this image close. The forests that have never seen the sun still breathe softly in the dark, reminding us that some forms of beauty bloom only where light cannot reach. Rest well, traveler of the quiet ocean. Let the night carry you gently home. Good night.